Hey there, welcome back. In a couple of previous videos, you've seen the XTR here, and I sort of glossed over what I'd done to it. Well, I got to thinking, maybe there's one or two of you that'd like to see a little more detail. Well, here's how it went. So here's the gem that I had to work with, an 81 Yamaha XT 250 parts bike that came with my buddy's bike. And there wasn't much left. In fact, it was in such tough shape it wouldn't even roll because the front brake was locked up. The engine was in a box and in pieces, plus we had robbed the ignition out of it to get John's bike running. Now at this point, I would imagine an intelligent person would probably wonder, why in the world would you even mess with such junk? Well, I wouldn't if I didn't already have this SR250 that I was given and been screwing around with for the last several years. And while sporting an old YZ80 gas tank and mid-70s Honda XL250 suspension that was shot, it just wasn't up to the task. The engine, however, was still great, and it shared most of the same architecture of the XT engine, and so I was hoping that an engine swap would be worth all the effort. First things first, I needed to address that front brake, so at least I could push the darn thing around the shop.
I was trying to be careful, but as you can see, it's still a little piece broke off there, and she started to break off right there. It's like this thing was sitting on the Titanic or something. The linings apparently came loose from the shoes, so it was just jamming up in there and all the corrosion. So at least now we can turn the thing. Bearing feels just fine. Good grief, that was way too hard. It is time for a heart transplant. On the parts bike, we've got the air box cleaned out of there, so I'm just going to run an open pod filter. We've got the Supermoto fender on there, handlebars, actually from the KLR, which is back there. This is a more expensive handlebar setup, and I might be selling the KLR, so I put a new $20 handlebar on that one and kept the, I don't know, $70 handlebar. For this, before I get too deep, I just want to make sure that that motor fits in there. Now this down tube right here goes a little bit further because the engine that was in it did not have an electric start. And this one has the electric start hanging right out the front. But I got the mount there and everything. I might just have to fab up different holes to mount to the front down tube. This thing's all dirty from screwing around last weekend. I'm kind of hoping that the other bike is going to be as fun, because this one is so small, but the rear shocks are just shot. They're like pogo sticks. There we go. Now that I have the first bolt in, I merely had to pivot the engine upward until the upper motor mount lined up. And now simply put that in place. And now I have my template to drill holes in the frame and then basically drill it out big enough for a reinforcement. All right, as you can see, that hole does not line up very well. I got the bottom bolt in, so it looks like the mount needs to be massaged a little bit right here. Apparently this down tube is at a little bit different angle on this bike, but nothing serious. A little curved is what I wanted. Yes. You can see I got the hole drilled through the frame using the mount as a template. The frame has these braces in there, and that is just right above that hole. I've got the brace cut out of the frame from the piece that was down here that I cut off. And so now I just need to drill this hole out to fit this brace in there and weld it in place. I drill a hole in the mount to match up to that hole, and then we'll be set. So right now you're looking down on the motor mount spacer that I just put in there. I just need to tack it to the frame. So with everything in place, I'm gonna tack it in there. Just finished drilling the final hole. So now I just need to weld this hole shut and then weld the spacer in, and then it should be ready to install. Just finished welding in the spacer for the motor mount. So just gotta clean that up, give her some paint, I think it's gonna work.
At this point, I set up a temporary gas tank and swapped over the cobbled together wiring harness to check and see if the engine would still start.
Wow, power. I gotta disconnect the battery. Bad sparks. Got the exhaust all tacked in place. I was able to reuse the exhaust from the SR up to about right there. Need to make an exhaust mount right here, and so here's my templates made from a pizza box. This is just a great way to kind of mock things up, get it all figured out, and then I'll make that out of sheet metal and weld those onto the pipe. Was able to reuse this pipe. This actually went much longer down to about here. So I still have a nice joint right here that's nice and tight. And this should be the rough location of the muffler. So I've got to make a bracket going from here up to the frame to support it. And that will also kind of support the luggage that fits quite nicely. There's like a 2-inch gap between the muffler and the saddlebags. I should be able to lop off like 2.5 inches off the length of that exhaust as well. We'll see how it goes. Finished cutting off the exhaust. Here is the length that I cut off of it. There is the mounts there. They also look kind of thin. And when I was building this, I had it just clamped right up tight against the frame here. And then after I was done, I dented the pipe so that it doesn't touch. Hopefully this won't get smashed by rocks and stuff. Starting to get some of the handlebar controls on there. And these are just temporary until I figure out what I'm going to do for switches. I just thought I would film how the wheel would roll, but the brakes would not move at all. I had to just kind of break this thing loose. Just need to clean this up a little bit. Oh, there. So we'll clean that up, get the brakes working before I take her out for a test spin. Brush is perfect here. It's brass, so it shouldn't take too much material from this aluminum casting. Just ran it through there. Got that all cleaned up. Put this on the bench wire wheel, and that cleaned up obviously really easy. And then I put just a little dab of caliper grease on there. I figured that would be an appropriate grease, not too much. Now she's just nice and good. Brake action is going to be great. Maybe just run over the shoes a little bit. I don't know if those linings are going to stay in place, but I'll run these for a little bit to try to wear down the drum. Well, just got done taking her for a test spin. The back wheel is wobbly, so I'm gonna have to true that up. The exhaust is too loud, but I've got an idea on that. But it works. Right, on to making the dash for the bike. I had this speedometer in my parts that the ratio was way off on the last bike I tried it on. Well, it just so happened to be close enough for this one. It's about 10% off, which I found is what basically every stock motorcycle is. So I did a little bit of CAD designing, cardboard aided design. We got these holes here and here for the original gauges, and so I just got those lined up. So the dash will sit about there. Here's my headlight assembly, and so that dash will just sit right behind there, and the headlight will mount up on the sides here on those tabs. I'm using this polymetal signboard, which is aluminum laminated with plastic in the middle and then another aluminum on both sides. Covered that with application tape so that I could draw on it more precisely with a pen and just kind of confirmed my measurements, made adjustments, and make sure everything is centered and true. Now to cut this out. Got the dash made up and already made up some tabs here to hold the headlight assembly. This aluminum bends better than this stuff does, so I had to do separate pieces. Now I'm just going to put nutserts in here. These are the nutserts. As the name implies, they're a nut and they're also a rivet. So this whole thing compresses with the tool. You have a nice, neat, captivated nut. it is time to put on my better tire, I guess. So this is a used tire that I have, a TKC 80. It came on one of my other bikes, KTM. So fortunately I saved that because the front tire that was on it, there's tread, but it's really old and dry. But the inner tube was stuck to the rim strip and it's just so corroded. There's just crust everywhere on this thing. The rim, I don't know, it looks like caked on antifreeze from the Titanic. It is really hard to get off. Inside, of course, this is just full of rust and corrosion and stuff. For that, I took the wire wheel on a drill and got all the loose stuff off of that. To get all this garbage off, I went right with the Scotch-Brite wheel and then hit it with some steel wool. It went from all this garbage to this. It still is not real pretty. Some of these places you can see, like right here, you can see some of the shine. It had a clear, I'm sure, over the aluminum originally. This stuff is just so bad that I think I'm burning off the clear here, so it'll be raw. Hopefully I can bring it back a little bit. It won't look quite so bad as that. You gotta make it look good, right?
Unfortunately, at this point, I was running out of time and neglected to film any more of the build. However, I got the camera out again during testing to make sure the bike was ready for the upcoming trip and to experiment with some action shots. Since the back wheel was so bad, I resorted to the one off the SR street bike, rebuilt the front forks, and built a little frame for my old luggage. Looking back over this build, I'm reminded of just how much work it was. But you know what? I'd do it all over again. Call me crazy, but I actually enjoy resurrecting an old vehicle. And it's even better yet if I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor by using it as intended. Now, if you've seen part 2 of my Trans-Wisconsin Adventure Trail videos, then you already know that this project didn't end here. So if you'd like to see the mess I got into building version 2.0, let me know in the comments. In fact, like me, you might even learn something. And hopefully in the future, it'll help you go 1 mile more.